Yo, what is up? Another week, Rush
Yes,
Hour
sir.
Pod. Yeah, this is Justin. I'm T Dub. Another incredible week. I mean, it's not there's a lot of news. We'll stay away from the really big news because there's enough coverage of that out there. Let's talk tech from the non-technical point of view.
Yes,
And the
sir.
first, we have a couple of topics this week, right? We're gonna talk Neuralink, Elon. We're gonna talk Disney and the problem they're having with kids and
Yep.
content per se. And then the last one
Yeah, the
was there
last
another?
one's this new Illinois law that just came out that provides some protections to kids who show up in like YouTube videos, basically around
Content.
like creator focused laws and content, which is pretty interesting.
All right, I love it. All right, so we'll kick it off. I watched the Neuralink press. I don't know if you call it a press conference. I'll link it in the description. But essentially, the Neuralink team and Elon jumped on and talked about an update of their product and what's coming. And the quick, it's sort of snapshot was they have one, I don't know, user, patient. I don't even know what you want to
Hmm.
call it. Oh well, if you don't know what Neuralink is, it's essentially a chip they are implanting in your brain, on your skull, like to be flush with your skull, that allows you to tap into essentially storage processing data, like part computer. It's essentially you becoming the Terminator.
There we go.
And there's been a lot of talk about like this is the counter to AI, where everyone's worried about AI taking over the world, and this is the hybrid version where we're kind of have the power of AI at our fingertips and implanted essentially. So they gave the demo and they talked to the one person that has it implanted, and they showed him um, using the product. And so essentially, it is like it allows you for those people that have sort of brain damage, that allows them to lose sort of function of their limbs or parts of their body, and the Neuralink chip allows them to sort of reconnect that and do daily functions to some form. And they showed this the guy looking at his computer and controlling it without using any arms, fingers, tips, nothing. He just looked at the screen and he was able to scroll, highlight, search, draw things, and sort of like browse the web and browse content and interact just with his brain. And it was, essentially tied to the computer in the cloud. When I just it's crazy and really cool. I don't even know where to think, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. And Elon's thoughts were, hey, we're going to help a lot of people that have brain damage and brain issues, and people that are handicapped and have damage either at birth or later in their lives, that they can sort of, you know, people that are paralyzed and things like that. Imagine Stephen Hawking with his chip wouldn't need, the setup that he had. He could just control it with his brain. So yeah, that's pretty incredible thought. And he's just like, hey, we're not. He made a joke. He said, "Hey, for those of you that claiming we're planting chips in everybody, we have one client. we have not put chips in anyone else's brain, and we'll continue. I think next quarter they're gonna have one more." And the thought is like, how do they continue to progress this concept of using essentially robotics and processing for the brain? What is your take on hearing that?
Yeah, I generally think that any type of technology that allows people who have certain disabilities to live a more fulfilling life is fantastic, right? I think it's hard to kind of argue that there's some
Yep.
negative aspect of that. And you think about where this technology could be, and at the rate and speed of technological innovation, 2 years from now, or 5 years, 10 years, will just allow so many people who they're born with some type of disability or had traumatic accidents, challenges, diseases, et cetera, to be able to interact with the world in a more fulfilling way. And I think that's kind of the reason why that's why I love the technological space, is because,
Yeah.
these things that kind of seem like science fiction at some point get, executed and allow people to live better lives. So I don't think, I think all of that, is incredible. If we want to go into, where my mind can also go to, which is what are the dystopian down the line,
Yes.
challenges. And I'll be curious to see how you think about this as well. I think about it within the context of, all right, if you're looking at this in the future and what impact this is going to have, where maybe all people have access to these type of chips now for their kids or for themselves, et cetera. It's incredibly
Right.
expensive to kind of turn you into a bit of a supercharged human, where you have some people who can afford and can do it and not necessarily everyone. And then it creates even more of a gap between people who do have access to the technology, when you're able to
Totally.
kind of basically tap into the internet in your brain, or all
Yep.
human knowledge or whatever it is, and others don't. It just widens the chasm of, the haves and have nots. And I think that there are some serious kind of moral and ethical issues at stake there. But I think in terms of, medical benefits, like helping cure cancers or giving people more mobility or whatever else these technological innovations provide, that piece I think is fantastic. Where it goes down the line in terms of people then manipulating or using that to get some type of advantage down the line, if it's not
Right.
accessible to everyone, then I have, issues with that.
Yeah, he went over sort of the I don't know if you want to say logistics of it, but it was essentially the chip works for 4 to 5 hours, as a battery life of 4 to 5 hours, and you put on a helmet to charge it. It takes 40 minutes to charge it. So they're on a path now where it's essentially they're hoping the next version will extend it to 6 to 8 to get you through an 8 hour workday, and then eventually it'll be run at all day, like all day battery life and nighttime charge. Um, so like functionality wise, it's going to be pretty solid. Even at 4 to 5 hours of working and then a 40-minute charge seems very reasonable, right? Like if you're talking about somebody who has to work with it, then it's like you work, gets you to lunch, you charge it, eat something to eat, and you come back and finish the day. That seems doable. I mean, it seems like it
Yeah.
could function as a tool to help you, like you said, contribute and be a part of society and communicate with people, do have a job and have a normal life. Pretty, I agree. It's pretty cool, and immediately your brain kind of goes into this world of like, okay, and then what happens when you can scale this thing up and everyday people can use this to advance. It's kind of like the robot talk we had a couple weeks ago in terms of like,
Yeah.
hey, not only you're gonna have a robot in your house doing your cleaning, all of that, you're gonna have a chip planted into your brain to help you communicate and do that. It does sound pretty wild. Like we're on this path of like, people are talking about the robots taking over, and we're basically making every movie possibility come to life with like you've got AI and you've got actually Sentinel bots, and then now you got plants, chips planted into your head, and you got spaceships. Like we're
Yeah.
in it, man. We're in the future.
Yeah. It's almost like there have been several movies about what happens after this.
Yeah,
We're
and
kind of
none of
living
those
in that
ended
reality
well.
now.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one where everybody's like, "Yeah, no, I'm glad we did that," and everything just ended up great.
yeah.
I don't
No,
know.
that is yet to happen. I mean, it's not much of a. I don't know. Maybe there's a movie in the making. I was on a flight the other day and I watched Ex Machina. I don't know if you've seen that. I
I haven't
watched
seen the
that.
whole thing, but I've seen clips. Yeah,
Yeah, I watched that, and that one's kind of, yeah, it definitely teeters with all of this stuff in terms of AI and robots and all this weird world of what's really reality. Um, but it's exciting times.
yeah,
Hearing Elon do like the things we've talked about him in such crazy terms in the past month, right? Like with from robo taxis to robots in your house, cyber trucks, now like Neuralink things in your brain. Like this guy is all over the map. Like he's really
yeah,
making a huge impact on the world. It's
totally.
kind of cool.
What do you think about kind of what does he talk? Maybe they talked a little bit about this in the session of like what the longer term vision is for all this work. Like when he talks about maybe kind
He
of the
did.
mission, what is the mission?
He
Yeah.
talked. He talked about the sort of short term middle ground of like helping all what we just discussed, making an impact on all those lives that have been impacted by some sort of brain damage, whether you're
Mhm.
born with it or have an injury or develop some sort of illness. He's in his like medium short plan. It is all about helping those people like be a part and have support and tools that can help them operate and live a normal life. Like he just feels like that is a mission that's worth fighting for. You know the number of people that have these things are going to continue to grow. So he's like, we want to help them. We want to help them have a normal life. Incredible, just that alone. He talked about, and then he kind of tapped into the future of like, hey, maybe there's going to come a time, but it's he's obviously always on the optimistic side of timelines, but like, hey, there's going to come a time where these things are going to be able to help everyday people with their memories and like stopping Alzheimer's and dementia and all these things, where your brain is going to be essentially you know a little more tapped into for the majority of your life, which
Yeah.
yeah, that's I mean that he just kind of delves into it a little bit. He doesn't want to I think on purpose, he doesn't want people to go down that rabbit hole of like,
Uh-huh.
okay, how much is it going to cost, and are we going to create this like gap here of the haves and the have not? I think he purposely avoided all of that and just said,
Yeah.
let's just stick with. I mean, he says it like two or three times in the thing, like let's just stick with helping the people that need help today, and not going down this like, hey, the CEO can now tap into, you know, um, the power of the internet right in his brain, and other people can't. Like he didn't go down that whole rabbit hole.
Yeah. I and correct me if I'm wrong if you heard like this stat or if this sounds crazy outlandish, but don't we use just such a small percentage of our overall
Yeah,
brain capacity? Like 10% or something. I don't know if I'm getting
yeah,
that number right, but I think it's something like that. I think what's very fascinating is like whether you'd be able to use that technology to really tap. Imagine if you could go from 10 to
right,
15 or 20% of
right,
what your brain is capable of like using this
right.
technology. Imagine what that will unlock for humanity. That's also really interesting as well. But I'm not as sure like how this specific technology would enable, if it enables you kind of tap into increase, if you have full, brain capacity within the context of what most humans use, can you tap into more of
Right.
your brain capacity by, leveraging technology is kind of
Yeah, I think
some entry point.
the pieces that they've tapped into for the purposes of this are like motor skill, like the stuff to keep you functioning.
Yep.
I think it's less behavioral and decision making and things like that. I think that's like in the frontal lobe, if I'm not mistaken. He's not touching that. It's more. I think it's. He talks about it in the thing. I'm definitely getting out of my realm of
That's all right.
understanding, but like
Yeah.
he's tapping into the parts of your brain where it's like motor function and thinking and like doing, and enhancing those. But yeah, I've heard. I mean, we've all heard those stats of like, hey, we only use 5 or 10% of our brain, and humans are capable of much more. We just don't know, and it seems like the medical science has not really understood the brain and all of its capabilities, and like what are the functions of all the things that are happening, which is understandable. It seems like an incredibly complex thing. You can't just tap in. Even like you talk about football and CTE and the brain damage that some of those players have faced. They don't know that until you've passed away and they take out the brain and dissect it.
Yeah.
So it's like clearly the brain is a super complicated, intricate, network of neurons and controls that we just don't understand. I think it's going to be a while before we understand it all. So that's the biggest fear I have. Like you don't know what you're tapping into. I mean,
Yeah.
truthfully,
Fair
like you
enough.
just don't know. Yeah, you're putting something in your brain. I get it if it helps you have a more quality life, but like a totally healthy person plugging something in to try to untap more, that's just it sounds pretty scary. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's like the evolution of steroids or performance enhancing drugs.
Yeah, I wonder if like the if it's like exponential kind of the learnings that you get
Yeah.
or that the technology kind of grow in the same way as kind of what we're seeing with generative AI to go. This is from the non-technical perspective. So
Right.
I imagine some of you are trying
Right.
to figure out these questions as well. But if it does increase exponentially, then yeah, it is, it would be very kind of curious to see where we are kind of 5 years from now with this type of
Yeah.
technology and what that unlocks.
Yeah. I think in the brief understanding of it, it's kind of like basically giving your brain a memory stick, so to speak, as crazy as that sounds. Like you take a memory, it uploads it into the cloud, and then you can access it much easier when you need to. They can process things quicker and get to those memories. That's that alone is already sounding pretty wild. Like,
Hmm.
imagine you can store all you basically photographic memory. Like you see something, you can remember
Yeah.
it, you store it away, you can access it when you need to. Like that is
Yeah.
wild. Like you could take a snapshot of a document, save it in your brain, and then later go back and read it without anything. That's crazy.
That is pretty well. It actually does make me think of I feel like there was a Black Mirror episode, one where the
Was
guy like
there?
maybe found out that like his partner was cheating or something like that. He was able to kind of go back into like
And
his
replay
memory
it.
and replay it. Ah, more and more our lives are becoming that,
Yeah.
which
No,
is
this is
wild.
definitely a lot of things have felt like Black Mirror though over the last week. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, maybe that's a good segue into the land of media and entertainment.
yeah,
One of the things that you kind of mentioned on the offset was some of the stuff going on with Disney, and
yeah,
so I came across this article that basically talked about the issue that Disney is now having with kids, and specifically kind of like share of time spent on their network versus other channels. So
right.
the Disney Channel, which was kind of like a gateway to all things Disney, kind of plummeted recently from top 10 network with nearly 2 million average daily primetime viewers in 2014 to number 80 with about
Yeah,
132,000 viewers in 2023.
yeah,
And kids are really getting their TV fix now with streaming. And these are all things
yeah,
that make sense, but I think it's interesting to look at it within the context of these incumbents within the
yeah,
entertainment industry and kind of the power that they had before. But 2/3 of the time that they of television time is now through streaming for our 2 to 11 year olds based on Nielsen data. And
wow,
YouTube has basically become the king and is the primary way in which people are watching that content. And interestingly, and I actually found this pretty fascinating, which was like Disney in 2022 said that 60% of Disney Plus subscribers were actually adults without kids at home.
yeah,
So obviously, it kind of speaks to the IP content, but who you think it's targeting, like these kids, and they're the ones consuming the content, and it's like that kind of foreshadows the success that Disney can have over time. Well, actually, most of the people who are subscribed to it aren't even people with kids who probably just like the IP from whatever other experiences they had, and so it's very interesting to see how these consumption habits have changed in terms of like where kids are going and the type of content. I think it said that the most popular content right now for young people is like Cocomelon and a few other shows that are not Disney related shows or
yeah,
Disney related content. And so there's a lot of downward pressure there, which longer term is going to have more and more of a negative impact on the business if they're
yeah.
not able to kind of capture people at that young age in the same
Yeah,
way.
it's definitely the TikTokification. It really impacting them because, I mean, take my life as an example. My wife is a huge Disney head. We got
Mm-hmm.
married at Disneyland,
Yep.
and she's
She's not playing around. She's not
yeah,
playing.
she loves Disney. Like we just went to Disneyland and took the kids. We have the Disney Plus. But when I look at my kids, like they don't care about the stuff as much. They do it because their mom likes it. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, if you don't have that impact of it, I mean, they already don't watch. We have Disney Plus. They never watch it. Like they go
Mm.
YouTube, they go down that rabbit hole. They go TikTok, and they're 6, 7, and 10, and they're already like Disney Plus. I don't want to spend the time to watch that. We'll do it as a family.
Mm-hmm.
We'll sit down and watch a cartoon or something as a family, but not on their own. No, they're going YouTube.
Yeah.
And now recently YouTube like they don't even do the full videos, they do the YouTube shorts, and they like kind of go through that content. So yeah, the attention span kids is getting shorter and shorter, and like Disney hasn't really created short form content like that. So I think that's where the
Yeah.
issue seems to be, right? They're stuck in the old world that we grew up in, which was like, hey, kids, you go to you have a cable box and you scroll through the guide. There's one
Yep.
channel for kids, Disney. You leave it on, you walk away. Now there's way more choices, and there's way less time to make those choices. And it seems like Disney hasn't caught up to that. Right?
Yeah.
Is that
I think you nailed it. One of the things that they did recently, I think they invested in Epic Games for amount to have
yes?
their IP start to show up in
Yeah.
like Fortnite.
Yep.
And I think the strategy there was to have some of their more of their IP show up in content that you would then find on YouTube and like through
Yes.
Shorts and TikTok, etc., to aid
Makes
with
total sense.
discovery.
Yeah.
I mean, they still have a lot of popular titles through like Marvel and Star Wars and
Toy Story and
Pixar.
yeah.
Yeah, but I think what's happened is there's kind of been over reliance on that and an over reliance on creating like sequels and content, and not necessarily new
Right.
new content. Now you do have like Inside Out and stuff like that came that I think is that shows that there's still an interest, but it's I think it's waning.
Yeah.
And it also talked about how a I think maybe it was 25 years ago or something like that. I don't know. Actually, I don't know what the time period was, but it said, maybe a generation ago, only 25% of their revenues were coming from experiential, which is like the parks and things like that. And now it's like 75%. And it's not even that more people are going to the parks, it's that they're better at monetizing those people. So
Yes. Yes.
so we kind of talked about like, are they at kind of the ceiling of their customer, LTV relative to what they're able to get through it, squeezing as much out of this experiential piece as possible? Or is there still room to grow? But you were there recently, so what would you say
I
on
mean, they
that piece?
definitely are better at monetizing the parks because now, like, you know, skipping the lines with the guest pass and the light, like whatever they call it, genie. That's like $30 a ride, and like every little incremental thing is a little more money. So, in every hotel, all the prices are up, so it totally makes sense. I think the passes are a little more like there's like a SoCal pass and there's like a holiday pass. There's all these little passes that you can get. All of those prices are up and they're more restrictive than ever. So like if you want to just go and enjoy the park and do it in really efficient time, you're just going to spend more. And some people are willing to do that, right? If you want to go there and not wait in lines all day, you just have to pay extra, 30, $40 every time you want to
Right.
cut a line. People are doing it. I was there. I witnessed it. Lots of people are in those lightning lines. And I'm just like, wow, that's a lot of $30 passes they've sold to get people, and it works. I mean, I invest. I know Disney is down right now, but I reinvested in Disney because,
Yeah.
in my opinion, the IP is so strong that in my opinion, long term, they will figure out. Like these are new channels that they haven't tapped into with short form, but they'll figure it out. They have the deep pockets.
Yeah.
They have the know-how. They might not be Mr. Beast in terms of like the way they're built, but they will. These are, just like if, the VR it becomes the main thing, give it time and Disney will figure out how to make their IP work on those new channels. And I think they're going to figure it out here. It's just a matter of
Yeah.
time.
Well, that's really interesting on one of those last points you made around. Oh, they may not be able to do like Mr. Beast, but they may have some other opportunities. So I'm actually curious. Like, so if you were them in their shoes, maybe I'll provide an answer after this. Like, if you were in their shoes and we're thinking of like a 5-year plan to kind of understand these trends in content consumption and their current business model, the fast pace at which like generative AI, other things are moving, where would you invest if you were them? You're the CEO, you could outline the strategy. What would that look like?
No, I think going back to where they were. I mean, I was already too old for this, but there was a time where it was like Hannah Montana and like Disney Junior sort of actors and actresses, quote unquote, kid actors. Um,
Yep.
and at that time, like Nickelodeon was also kind of doing their thing.
For
It's just
sure.
an evolution of that. I feel like where I would invest my
Mhm.
time is in the next Mr. Beast, like going back and
Yeah.
hiring kid influencers and having that fact plugging out like, hey, we're going to overpay to figure this thing out, and we're going to, you know, have an affiliate or an influencer program that is going to outdo everyone. Everyone's going to have to do it because we're
Yeah.
paying the most, and you're going to start slowly learn and discover, kind of like what Mr. Beast did in terms of like, hey, I'm like, when me and my friend got together and did it, we learned twice as much, twice as fast. Only imagine Disney saying, hey, we're going to invest $10 billion in finding
Hmm.
the next short form superstar. And then, like that, how quickly they're going to learn when they have hundreds, if not thousands, of influencers across the world
Yeah.
working on content and trying to maximize it. I just feel like, just like any other, boomer, like they
Yeah.
probably are like, this TikTok thing, it's a fad, it's gonna go away. They haven't realized like that this generation that grew up on TikTok is going to continue this methodology and all the things they do. So
Yeah.
my guess is they're going to have to eventually jump in and be like, all right, well, this is here to stay, so we're going to make content around it and
Yeah. Go
to
back to their kind
stop.
of old model of those shows and the creators, and they're just adapting to these new formats and
Right,
pump
they
them
did
out
it
with
in the
their
past,
channels.
right?
Yeah.
Like, because
Yeah.
when
There's a
MTV kind of
playbook.
shifted to real world and this, like Disney slowly did it with kids, and then the kids stuff. Lots of people grew up on those old school Disney Junior shows. And I imagine it will happen again, right? They're going to shift down lower. They definitely have the brand and the time and the energy to then
Yeah.
create really short form content. Like, I mean, my kids went through this Blippi phase, and then they went through Peppa Pig, and then there's
Hmm.
no reason Disney can't be in that. I think it's just
For
a matter of
sure.
focusing their efforts.
Yeah, I think you're right. And maybe the way that I'd extend that and build off what you said is, and I know you still play like Fortnite from time to time, if not,
Yeah,
if not relatively regularly. How people are spending more and more time in these virtual worlds, and not necessarily through kind of VR interface or AR
right.
interface, but through these worlds, like through Robloxes of the world and Fortnites, et
Yep.
cetera. And if I were them, I probably would continue to kind of extend into those worlds to try to build out
Yeah.
significant Disney presence within those, because ultimately, and this is something that we kind of always go back to, and I wonder if you agree, is you're trying to compete against share of time with
Yes.
everything else that exists out there, whether it's them going on TikTok or watching
Right.
YouTube content or watching a Disney show or spending time outside with your friends, et cetera. It's all like a shared time of your day. So the more impressions that you can have of your specific content, the higher likelihood it would be, that people convert or that you stay top of mind or they
Yeah.
lean into more IP. So I feel like that's probably an approach that would be helpful. And yeah, I wonder if they can take their experiential piece, because they know that has worked so well, and expand it even further, even in the physical world outside of kind of just core Disney World, Disneyland. Do more
Yeah.
pop up experience, or partner with a Blippy or something like that. Is he doing like a tour around the country and bring in some of the characters as well to kind of what I think is do the Drake approach, which is find out what's kind of popping and hot at the time and lend
Collaborate.
your brand clever, yeah, and collab, and then kind of continue to follow the trends there. So I imagine that they're doing it, but maybe leaning even more into those form factors.
Yeah, the things that they have in their corner are obviously number one, the IP. They have the resources, and so the like production value and quality. Um, they can lend that to people that are doing this. That seems like an incredible partnership opportunity, right? If you're an up and coming Blippy and making kids content, and it starts popping. Like, I imagine having access to incredible IP and incredible cameras and studios are going to be a
Yeah,
great. It's going to be an incredible benefit. Um,
yeah,
it's just a matter of
it's
catching
interesting.
those.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting because if you think of like Coco Melon and I'm trying and Blippy and some kind of like the new emerging, you know, kids content that really blew up. You would have thought that through an M&A like a
Yeah.
Disney would have got at least one of the two based off
Right.
of just how popular it
Right.
was. But it's these private equity firms or these other kind of smaller media conglomerates. They were able to jump on that, and I wonder if that's just them not necessarily being plugged into it, or is it hubris or combination of the
Yeah.
two, or I don't know. But I imagine now with kind of like the share of time that YouTube is getting relative to like their Disney offerings, that it would hopefully be a wake up call in some way.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of it is, hey, we're Disney. We don't need that. We're the, happiest place on earth, and all of those things that I can imagine an executive saying, no, that stuff's below us, and that's on the peripheral of, ultimately we're the benchmark, and I think that's
Yeah,
the numbers are going to slowly show that that's not the case anymore, and they're going to have to adjust, right?
yeah,
Like, the more and more
yeah.
studies come out of people doing this, they're going to have to change.
100%. There's going to be increasingly more pressure from the Apples of the world and the
Yep.
Netflixes and the Amazons, et cetera, starting to create their own content and encroaching on that space. And
That's a great
I think
segue
that
into like
yeah,
what
yeah.
you brought up with kids being influencers.
Oh, 100%. So this is a really interesting article that came out recently. It basically talks about this new Illinois law that basically requires parents to compensate their children if they appear in 30% or more of the family social media content. So like YouTube,
Right.
Instagram, TikTok, etc. And that the children will be entitled to at least 15% of the earnings of those videos, which will be placed in a trust until the kid turns 18. And then when they become adults at 18, the child can request that the videos are actually and take legal action if they're not. And so, this was actually signed into law July 1st, and there's
Wow.
no enforcement mechanism outside of the legal options. But I think it speaks to it speaks to a creator economy in space, and as it becomes more developed, you have these legal frameworks and guidelines being created around
Yeah.
it to the benefit of the consumer. In this case, to you know like non-adult children, which I think is actually a really great law. But it's so fascinating that enough, even though it's kind of like a even though it's kind of like a long tail, we have some content creators who are making a lot, and then you have others who aren't. So much of people's lives, and so much, there's so much kind of fervor around creator economy and becoming a content creator, and that being like the number one job that Gen Z in particular wants. That these kind of laws and protections need to come into place because it's becoming more of a prominent part of our overall economy.
Right.
And so those really kind of like fascinating, not only law, but also, microcosm of what's going on within creator economy generally, and how it's now impacting families on an intimate level who are creating content.
Yeah. What are your thoughts of having your kids on social media? Like both like watching as a consumer and also as a creator. Like where do you stand on it?
Yeah. I mean, I have identical twin girls and they're so cute. And again, that's, I'm biased. So with,
No,
with my digital marketing know-how, could we get them in a YouTube channel set up and maybe try to make something happen there? Yeah, maybe. Who knows if they will blow up or not? But I think the way I feel about that is that I feel like the kids should have some agency in choosing.
yes.
And I also feel like we're so nascent in terms of social media. We're not totally certain of all the impacts that it could have. And again,
Yes.
I'm someone in consumer social, and so are you. But I think that a lot of the guardrails and things that are in place are actually probably good for a
Yeah.
developing mind and for
Yeah.
kids. So it's a long-winded way of saying I probably would not necessarily have them involved, or at least that's my current leanings. Would want them to kind of opt in a bit more when they're
Old
when they're
enough.
older. Yeah, when they're old enough.
Yeah. I'm anti social media, like with kids, or as in general. Like I don't really post my life. I don't. For me, this, some things are left better in real life, in person, right? So
Sure.
I don't like the idea of like someone that a mutual acquaintance, not even a friend,
Hmm.
that happens to follow me on a social media account. to watch my kids grow up. That for me, it just doesn't feel right. So I like to make a concerted effort to never post. If you look through my Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, I never post kid photos. I never post updates and things that I just don't feel like it's the right place to, talk about my kids. I don't know. I just feel like I'm similar to you. I feel like they have the right to know that, and they're too young right now to make that choice. Like, hey, Dad, I don't want you updating people on my life. I could understand that, so I just don't do it. If they get
Yeah.
older and they're like, "Why didn't you do it more?" I can at least explain, like, "Hey, you weren't old enough to make a choice. I don't want to put a bunch of your photos out there. I have no idea what impact that could have on
Yeah,
you."
for
But
sure.
yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I mean, it could go the other way, right? They could literally flip it the other way and be like, "Oh, you don't care about us. You mom and dad never posted anything about us." I don't know. Like, it's possible. You just
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
explain it when the time comes.
For sure. I feel like when my kids are pretty young now, they're four, a little over four, and they don't necessarily understand kind of that nuance. And it'll be interesting to see, when they're close to your kids' age, where they can, have a bit more nuanced conversation around that, what it will be like. I would say, for me, I don't post that regularly on social media anymore. I used to post
Yeah.
way more. Now that I have kids, I don't post as much. I will post update photos because I have some extended family who I don't interact with as often. I think it's nice for them to be able to kind of see some content,
Yeah.
of how they're developing. But I guess I was thinking about it more in terms of like, oh, could I create some type of, real
Creator.
content play
Yeah.
yeah, really like creator
Yeah.
content around them. And I think
Yeah.
that, they should be able to opt into that. Now, there are kids who are child actors, things like that, and I'm at, they have fulfilling careers, and that's how they got their start. Was imagine their parents kind of putting them out there. And I'm not necessarily
Yeah.
saying that it's all negative per se, but
Yeah. Totally.
relative to everything else I got going on, I don't know.
I'm.
Probably not until they're at least older, or we want to do it, and there'll have to be some guardrails about the type of content
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like because of AI and robotics and all these things, I always am like concerned about uploading images of your kids and then someone stealing them or trying. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know where
no, that's
that
true.
goes and what people are doing with deep fakes and trying to scam people with my using my kids' photos and things like that. Like all that stuff seems to be in play, but taken out
Yep.
if you just don't post about. If you just don't post any
Yeah.
photos, you don't put anything. I just take all that stuff out of the equation. Um, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe ultimately that's the conservative, like old man methodology.
No, I
But
don't think that's an old man view. I think most people would be, generally aligned with that. I think most people don't create content just anyway, right? And so
yeah,
even fewer people create content with their kids in it. So I
their
think most
kids.
people
Yeah,
would
that's
be
fair.
in line with you. When I think about these laws of people who do want to do it, right? Of people who see like, oh, my kid has some unique talent, or our family has some unique story. We want to make sure we share that out, et cetera. I think, one of the things that it does is that it creates more of a legal framework that I think is closer to what
Yeah,
exists for child actors and like
yeah.
regular TV shows, right?
Union.
And the
Yeah,
protections that they get, which I think is really important. I also think that just because your parents have you in a show, and if you're monetizing, don't necessarily do all the most responsible things with the
yeah,
money. So if you have a bit of a net that you'll get access to when you're 18 that no one has touched, and you can use that as like a kind of a financial starting point for yourself as you get older.
right.
Like that's pretty cool as well to have that.
No, that's very cool.
Yeah.
No, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair way to sort of I don't even know regulate like how you
Mhm.
use your kids. It just seems kind of sad that you need the government to step in, but I get it.
I know.
Like
Well,
we're definitely a culture of spend and consume. So I can see,
mhm.
if you're not educated financially and you're just like, hey, I'm just going to keep spending and quote unquote investing in my kid's future by making more content, putting in, and then the kid has no say in it. It seems like the right thing, right? Like
Agree.
let's make sure the kids
100%.
have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
And I like the caveat that at 18 they can decide they want to delete it, which
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
seems right. Like, hey, I'm
Yeah,
going to delete it.
it does seem like, I generally within the space of the mind of, empower the people who create us, like make sure that they are getting, you know, whatever best from them. And oh, there are going to be laws and regulations that are going to kind of mess that up. I'd err toward not doing that. But I feel like they got this right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
it seems fair.
that's
But again, it's all like yeah, you kind of need to see real life examples of it. Like, I don't know what 15% looks like in terms of like, hey, your kid appears in 15% of the content. Like, what does that mean? If you're creating a massive show and they're in it, like 15%, what does that even look like? If they're in the background, does that count? Or I have no idea. But
there will be a lot of
on the
challenges.
surface, it seems it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
On the
yeah,
surface,
yeah.
it totally makes sense.
100%, 100%. I think there will be a lot of legal challenges and arbitration and things that have kind of gone on with like traditional child actors and their parents that will become
Yeah.
like even more intense and complex now. Because what does 30% of the content mean? Does that mean 30%
I
of a
don't.
specific video, 30% of how often you show up in like static posts within video? Like, what does that mean? How do those laws translate against
Right.
across state lines and across country lines? It becomes very complicated. But I think that's also
Totally.
kind of cool as well to see just how the space has evolved and how it's really become
Yeah.
you know
I like it. It's like a
a
stake in the
practice.
ground. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I hear 30%. I have no idea what that means. Like 30% of speaking, it's visual. Like what? Like there's so many ways to define percent.
Yes.
Right? Like, if they're just sitting in the background the entire time, is that 100% or is that zero? I don't know. I
Yeah.
have no idea. But
Wow.
anyway,
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it in it as like in a as nuanced way as that. But yeah, that's exactly like the right next step in terms of the thinking.
yeah, understanding where it goes next is crazy. But anyway, anything else? I appreciate your time today, man. That was good.
Yeah,
Good
man.
stuff.
Of course, of course. If y'all are enjoying the content, please make sure to like and subscribe. We try to kind of go after the topical consumer topics of the week. But if there's anything else you want us to talk about, just comment down below.
Hit us up. All right, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, later, bro. Talk soon.